Everyone's hiding the first meeting back. Can't hear you, Ken, if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry. I said I wasn't hiding. Sorry, I thought I hit on mute. I just didn't want to share the pain of having people have to look at me on Monday morning. That's all.
This is my earliest meeting in a while, I think.
Yeah. No, I've had a couple of other ones in relation to some of the other commission meetings. So they start at 9.
Yeah, we've got kind of strat planning wrap up for home on housing on Thursday, and that's going to be early. Hey, Kathy.
Happy Monday.
Oh, and Jackie. Oh, and Sheena's here as well. Nice. We've got 1 minute. Renee, you're running the show today?
With Cheryl and Brittany.
Nice. You glad to be back in your office, Kathy?
Yep. I'm much more focused here.
Hey, Carrie.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
All right. I'm showing 9:30, so let's get this started. Attendance is full. We've got myself, Councillor Mackay, Councillor Hughes are here. We've also got Councillor Hanson, Mayor Herron. Oh, and Councillor Watkins is here. I think that's everyone, eh? Could I get, oh man, my computer's being weird. Sorry, guys. So I'll call the meeting to order. And any concerns with the agenda? No. Okay, I'm going to adopt that as presented. And we've got a guest this morning. Do we know if Dale is in the room? Hi, Dale. So Dale, I understand you are here to give us a presentation about Wild North, and I assume the kind of grant that is being proposed later today. So I don't know how many minutes you need or if you have a presentation for us, but if you wanted to unmute and we'll go from there.
Hey, perfect. Yeah, honestly, thank you to council, everybody, for the opportunity to say a few words here. It's less of a formal presentation and just a very sort of brief conversation about what it is that we do in the city of St. Albert and why we're requesting funding. I know many of you may be familiar with Wild North. I know I've spoken before with council in the past. So let me just start by quickly telling you what it is that we do. So Wild North is considered an essential service by the city of Edmonton, but we don't only service the city of Edmonton, we service all the surrounding municipalities as well, including the city of St. Albert. What we do is we provide compassionate rescue and care and rehabilitation for injured and orphaned wildlife. So it's an unduplicated service. There's nobody else that is licensed to do the work that we do in the region. We annually take in about 3,000 injured and orphaned wild animals a year. We do our best to rehabilitate them and release them back into the wild where they belong. We take in about 1,300 phone calls every year from the public. And that would roughly 550 from the city of St. Albert. These are people that are calling us with wildlife-related concerns. So we help them deal with wildlife conflicts, help them rescue animals when they come across them, and so on. We have been exponentially busy this year, of course, with the COVID-19 situation, in that there are more people out and about, which means that our calls and requests for information and actual rescues are up 60% this year. Now, the organization has been around for 30 years. We've been servicing St. Albert for 30 years. Last year was our busiest year, and we're up 60%, 61% actually. So it's been a crazy year for us. And in the past, the City of St. Albert has been very supportive of us through their environmental initiatives grant. We have received for a few years in a row a grant to help us continue to do what we do. We apply for it every year. We're appealing to council to see if they would entertain the idea of giving us ongoing sustainable funding, so we didn't have to apply for it every year, which is a very important source of funding for us, of course. The sustainable funding is always the most difficult to secure, but it's important as our organization grows and grows, and we're looking after more animals to help keep us sustainable. So it's my understanding that Kristen Benson will be talking a little bit about this later on, but I just wanted to introduce myself. So my name is Dale Guino. I'm the executive director of the organization. And again, we'd like to continue our great relationship with the City of St. Albert and helping the community deal with their wildlife-related issues.
Thank you. I don't know if you know, I brought in a great horned owl about a year ago. So that's the scariest thing ever. Those are big animals to put into a cardboard box.
They certainly are. And which is really cool. Not only do we work with people like yourself who brings animals in, but we also provide a professional rescue service. So some of you may remember recently there was a piece in the news. We just rescued a heron there, took some netting off its beak that was trapped that your citizens were following around for a few weeks trying to figure out where he was. We finally got a call. We were able to capture him. And yeah, so yeah, when you have to deal with that stuff yourself, that can be kind of scary for sure.
That's great. All right. So on that note, are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Watkins, go ahead.
Yeah, where are you located at? Are you located in the city or out in the county or?
So we have two locations. Right in the city of Edmonton, we're in a facility that used to be the old City Pound. So just north of the Yellowhead on 27th Street. That's our hospital and triage center. So that's where we have our like X-ray and surgery suites and what have you. And then we have another facility out in Parkland County near Spruce Grove. That's our big acreage where we have our large flight pens and exercise pens to get these animals rehabilitated before release.
Okay, and most of the animals that you're rescuing lately of getting all these calls, what species of animal are they that you're getting the most calls about?
You name it. So we deal with about 250 species across the province. We're the only full scope rehabilitation center north of Red Deer. So we deal with the whole northern part of the province as well. So we get everything imaginable. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of waterfowl, like in St. Albert, for example, over the last couple of months. We've dealt with lots of geese and ducks and swans and heron, creatures that should have flown south, but maybe they have an injury or something that is not allowing them to. People find them out on the ice and they know they're not supposed to be there, so we get calls to come rescue them.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions. I think you guys do a really great job.
Appreciate that.
And coyotes too, you deal with coyotes too, right?
To a certain extent. So coyotes are, the way we can deal with them is a little bit limited. So we get our permits from Alberta Environment and Parks, and there's a list of animals that and what we can do. So we're not allowed to deal with a big carnivore, so we can't deal with things like grizzly bears and full-grown mountain lions. We're not allowed to deal with, although we can, to a certain capacity, we can't take full-grown moose into rehab, for example, although we can take babies. But things like coyotes, we have limited capacity to deal with them, but we can in some capacity. So we can field those phone calls, but we can provide humane euthanasia for ones that people find they're out and about, that kind of thing. But they don't allow us to actually rehabilitate them and release coyotes again. That's something they don't allow any rehabbers in the province of Alberta to do.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions. I like wildlife. What about snowshoe hares, like the ones you see in town?
Yeah, we get about 200 of those a year, 200 adults a year, and then lots of babies too. You know, people who are accidentally kidnap the babies when they're young sometimes and take them in, and we have to raise them and get them back out again. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for all the questions.
All right, we've got Councillor Mackay, and then we'll go to Councillor Hughes and Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dale. I enjoyed your presentation, and thank you for all the work that you and your organization does. I I was looking at your website yesterday, and I was looking at the sponsor page, and I know that you have sponsorship in Parkland County because of your large pens, and the City of Edmonton also is a sponsor. We're a sponsor. I'm assuming from your presentation, you get a lot of calls to go out to Strathcona County, up into Sturgeon County, and other municipalities. Do you get any financial help from those municipalities?
Yeah, so we get some. So Parkland County usually gives us, again, we have to apply for it every year, but historically we receive $4,000 from Parkland County on an annual basis to help us continue the work that we do. We just last year, like we did with you folks, we brought up to see if we can get some sustainable funding from the folks down in Sherwood Park in that area. We haven't secured that yet, but that's still in the works, and it's actually our hope. We receive about $120,000 from the City of Edmonton every year. That's exactly what we receive, and we have since 2015. Now that we're growing to the point where it's just becoming not sustainable for us, to be frank, to to tackle all this work in all these municipalities. So it's actually forcing us to go to municipalities like St. Albert, like the folks down at Sherwood Park, and we're going to be actually talking to every municipality that has a population base of 10,000 people or more to appeal for them for some help to continue, allowing us to provide the services that we do.
Great, thanks. Great answer. I'll probably have some questions for Christian later on, Madam Chair.
All right, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So let's talk money. That's why we're here today. How much does it cost on average, or how much have you? I don't know if you have those numbers of how much it's costing to handle all the calls from St. Albert. Like, I'm assuming that the actual expenses exceed $5,000. Do you have an idea of how much it's actually costing you to handle all of our calls?
I do, actually. So we spend about 4% of our budget in St. Albert in its entirety, and that would include taking the phone calls, going out and doing the rescues, doing the actual rehabilitation work for the animals that originate in St. Albert. That comes to about $24,000 roughly. So that's what it cost us in 2020 to do all the work that we do in the municipality.
And now you said that 2020 the calls were up, right? So, and we don't, hopefully, I don't hope that we actually have more people or more animals injured. The calls may go down, like going forward.
Potentially.
So you have put what the numbers were even in 2019 or anything prior to that, just so we have an idea of comparisons?
Yeah, so the number of calls and inquiries was up 61%. The number of actual animals that came in was not up nearly that high. It was up about 23%. So last year, though, when we crunched the numbers and everything, we spent about $19,000 in the city of St. Albert in 2019 and about $24,000 in 2020. Now, we don't really know, to be frank, what's going to happen when all this is over. We don't know now that more people have engaged us and know we're there, if we're going to continue to get a disproportionate number of phone calls, or if that's going to subside when there's less people out and about and they're back, back to work and back in their homes and doing things. So we really don't know what the future is going to bring, but that's been the trend so far. So 19,000 in 19 and 24,000 in 2020.
So probably much between 20 and 25,000, we'll kind of say is what we're.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair estimate.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
All right, Councillor Hanson, you're up.
Thank you. Great presentation, very informative. I just, one of the things that you said, Dale, was that your calls are up when there's conflict with animals. I just maybe wanted to ask you what that means.
Okay, so that could mean a number of things, but conflicts would include things like, I have a family of skunks under my porch. What do I do to get rid of those skunks? Maybe there are people who have historically been at work during the day and now they're at working from home and they're hearing squirrels in their attic and they don't know what to do. So we give them advice on how to deal with that. Maybe they're jogging, they're concerned about the coyotes when they're jogging about, and they want to know how to mitigate that. If they come across an aggressive animal, what they should do. So these are the kind of conflicts that we're talking about. So these would be over and above the physical, you know, I had a bird that hit my window, and you know, I need you to come pick it up, or I found an owl wrapped up in barbed wire fence, or you know, whatever. So, or I'm looking out at a stormwater facility and I see you know, the ice is coming and there's still a goose out there, and so you know, our rescue service sort of services or deals with the I guess the more difficult to rescue animals. So, you know, those ones we have to go out in a boat on, or we have to climb 60 feet up in a tree to re-nest a falcon or whatever. But the conflicts are mostly, mostly the, you know, the skunks. And some of them are, you know, I've got one of those, I've got a hare that's eating my garden. You know, how do I deal with that? You know, I want to save my flowers, and I got a hare that comes every day and is having lunch. So those are the kind of things we're dealing with.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, we have heard reports lately of raccoons.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
They're coming. They're coming.
Yeah, no, I come from Vancouver, and that's something we had to worry about. My other question was, knowing that we have a pest nuisance bylaw, I think we talk about all of these kinds of things in that bylaw. Do you work with the city around how we work with those complaints or those issues?
Yeah, sometimes we do. So in Edmonton, for example, 311 actually forwards all of their wildlife-related calls to us, and that's one of the reasons why they give us a little extra funding from an education perspective to help educate people. In other municipalities, we work with all of the pest management. So, for example, in St. Albert, last year was 2 years ago. Last year, I believe, we received a beaver that was caught up in one of your sort of culvert systems. And so we worked with the municipality. We actually were St. Albert Fire, because we had to get underwater to help us rescue that beaver. So we worked with them to help rescue the beaver. And then we work with pest management to ensure that when it comes time to release that beaver again, there's an appropriate spot, right? We work with the city to make sure that, you know, they want that beaver back there, or we want to release it maybe somewhere else where it's going to, you know, cause less issues blocking up culverts or whatever. So yes, we definitely work with all the city infrastructure when it comes to you know, pest management and all the other departments.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Councillor Watkins, did you have another question? Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry, you hit my button there, Dale. I have a rabbit. It's lived in my yard for 4 years, and it's ate the hell out of my garden last year. How do you stop it?
Okay.
I'll be trying to have it in my yard, but it's honestly got it nuked all my bean arch, and it ate a bunch of stuff. And keeps sleeping in my garden. Like,
I'll be brief and give you the nickel rundown, the 30-second answer here. Yeah, so aside from physically erecting a sort of an eyesore fence around your garden, which of course would be the surefire way of deterring them from getting in there, hares have very strong olfactory. So what you want to do is you want to convince them that there's a predator around, so that they're not going to be going to your garden. So one of the things you can do is you can use a scent that you're not going to pick up on, so it's not going to be strong or unpleasant for you, but it's going to deter the hare. So in this case, you can go to Canadian Tire, Bass Pro Shop, something like that. You can get this synthetically produced coyote urine, and it's actually used by hunters actually for hunting coyotes. But if you take this stuff and you spray it in a circle around your garden, that's usually enough to deter them. The hares will come up, they'll smell that, they'll think there's a coyote who is just there, who's nearby, and they're less likely to come in and eat your garden. So that's one of the things you can do, and it's a sort of quick and easy fix if you're willing to do that.
That might be one of the most fun things I've learned in a council. Councillor Hughes, do you have any questions about
the most interesting thing I've learned?
Just as a follow-up on top of that question, my other question was not related to that. Would that work on cats as well? Like if cats are getting into your yard and you don't want them in your yard, could that also work for cats?
Not so much, no. Cats are tough. I know in Edmonton surrounding area, we have 63,000 feral cats. And this doesn't even include the cats that are pets that, you know, people let outside. So cats make for many reasons, are pooping in people's gardens. They can obviously impact wildlife, like wild bird populations, things like that. So if you have a problem cat that is not identified, you don't know who it, you maybe doesn't have a call, you don't know who it belongs to, I would recommend live trapping and bringing to the animal shelter, and then then they can see if it has a microchip, reunite it with who it belongs to, and if not, put it through the adoption process.
Okay, thank you. So my actual question though is, so I'm not sure what other funding sources you have. So obviously you're going to the municipalities. Is there a funding source from the provincial government as well? Or is it just sponsorships, or how do you get money?
So the lion's share of our funding comes from the private sector and a small amount from corporate donations. So we don't receive static funding from any other levels of government, although we do apply for grants, usually project-based. So for example, we just received last year, just prior to the COVID stuff, we received a $70,000 grant, CIP grant from the provincial government that was used for expanding our rescue operations. So we're actually training. I have a 30-year history, and arguably the foremost expert when it comes to wildlife rescue in the country. So with this grant, I'll be training folks at rehabilitation centers all over Alberta and helping them develop their rescue programs so that they can go out and rescue those animals. So that's a project-based grant, but that grant doesn't actually help us for our core operations expenditures. So we don't get any core funding that way from any levels of government. So we receive. Last year, we received about $120,000 in personal grant money from average citizens. And then the rest, for the most part, comes from corporate donations. So we appeal to companies often that have environmental impact, like some of the oil companies, for example. We get sporadic, again, not confirmed every year. We have to apply for them every year, but organizations like Shell and Imperial Oil who are impacting wildlife, who are trying to give back to the community to help mitigate some of the things that are happening with their business practices. And then a lot of small businesses. We have a Wild 100 program where small businesses, sort of agreed to donate $500 a year ongoing to help us with some of that core funding.
So I try to figure out how to word this, but in an ideal world, recognizing that we all have limited funding and you have alternate funding sources, what would be an ideal percentage for the city to contribute to pay for our needs into your program?
Right. So, and for us, we're sure trying to gauge out. So if we look at somewhere like the city of, so our whole budget for the year is about $600,000, give or take roughly. So, the city of Edmonton gives us about $120,000 towards that. So they're our biggest ongoing contributor. They've been doing that for the last 5 years. And actually, they were considering a bump and helping us out a little further as we're getting more animals every year, except of course COVID happened and budget cuts and all that stuff, which we're cognizant of and appreciate. If we could look at somewhere in the realm of that ongoing contribution that you guys have been doing already through your environmental initiative grant. So we're hoping to secure somewhere in the realm of $5,000 a year from the city of St. Albert, which would represent about 20% of our costs in there, which, if you look at the city of Edmonton versus our costs there, and we're in that realm. Okay? So that's the sort of percentage that we're going to be approaching the other municipalities we're talking about 20% of our overall costs to see if we can get covered just to help us in the work that we do in respect to municipalities.
Perfect, because as you know, the recommendation is for the $5,000, and I just wanted to make sure that that would be a representative proportional share of what you need based on other people.
I think so, and this is a community effort. So if the community wants this service, then the community needs to contribute to it, and so that's where we get people coming in. But we definitely can use help for the municipalities to some degree. So 20% we thought seems like sort of a reasonable amount in our mind to help us and help the community with this work.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it.
Councilor McKay.
Yeah, I was just going to get in queue for the administration questions is all. If we're all done with Dale.
What I would like to do, Councilor Watkins, we can go to you if you'd like. If you've got another question for Blair. Christian is giving his presentation next in the agenda, so maybe and Mayor Heron, I'm seeing a finger as well. So maybe if we could leave questions for administration until after Christian's presentation, because I suspect that he'll answer some of our questions. So Mayor Heron, go ahead.
Thanks, Natalie. This is actually for Dale. So you mentioned earlier, and I just want maybe a little bit more detail, Dale, about the city of Edmonton and the relationship you have. Because I always equate Edmonton and St. Albert to be about a tenth of the size. So if Edmonton's giving 120,000, maybe we should be looking somewhere between 10 to 12,000. I'm not sure what the right number would be, but you also said that they refer everything to their staff refers every call to Wild North. So can you maybe just explain that a little bit more? So
Sure.
maybe the increased dollars they give you, they get an increased service in return, and maybe
Correct.
that's something we should be looking at.
Yeah, so we do a few things for the city of Edmonton. So their 311 service does forward animal-related calls to us. At least they have sort of the people that deal with the phones there, they have certain criteria. So if they're large, dangerous animals, like if it was a bear in town, they would send that to Fish and Wildlife. So they have a criteria which wildlife-related calls to send to us. So most of the ones that deal with conflicts with small, mid-sized animals and rescues, all those get directed to us. We also provide them with training services. So I train all of their park rangers and their animal care and control officers. And when I give them rescue training, not only does that give them tools to help increase capacity to look after animals, but they actually operate underneath our permit. So there are, when it comes to dealing with these wild animals, there's two main enforcement bodies. It's the Canadian Wildlife Service and then the Alberta Environment and Parks. Now, technically, municipal staff are not allowed to deal with certain kinds of animals. So if you had bylaw officers, for example, they would not technically, from a legal perspective, be allowed to handle migratory birds. The Migratory Birds Prevention Act, a federal act, prohibits them from handling things like geese and ducks and those kinds of things. So technically speaking, if you had a duckling that fell into a sewer, your municipal staff is not allowed to remove that duckling from the sewer system. So and of course it's done, and this is not something that's readily enforced, but from a legal perspective and from a legal protection perspective and liability, municipal staff is not allowed to do that stuff. So we train the City of Edmonton folks. They work underneath our permit. So this allows them. So now if they get a call, someone from the sewer folks can go down now and they can take that duckling out of a window well or in a sewer and put it back in the ground. They're allowed to do that now because they receive our training. So that's one of the services we provide, for example, which is why they pay a disproportionate amount.
So Dale, have you had conversations, or maybe this, Christian can jump in later. Have you had conversations with St. Albert municipal staff about, is that even an option that your permit would extend?
Yeah,
to staff?
we could talk about that. So the permit says, our Canadian Wildlife Service, for example, says that people, they have to be volunteers or agents thereof, a permitted organization. So we have those permits. And so they have to receive the appropriate training. So it doesn't get into any more detail than that. So they either have to be supervised by a member of our staff or have to receive appropriate training to allow them to legally deal with those kinds of animals. So that's definitely something we can talk about. I think it would be a good move for the city of St. Albert, just from a liability perspective and protection perspective, and to increase capacity. If somebody is there, a municipal staff, they have the training and they can intervene and do something to help a wild animal, then of course that serves everybody.
And just for anyone who's watching, you're registered not-for-profit, so any donation money, is there a tax credit with that?
Yeah, we issue tax receipts. We're a registered charity.
Yeah, because there's probably 3 people from the city of St. Albert watching right now. No, I'm kidding, but this is a way for you to get your name out there a little bit. So yeah, that's a good point. I will go on your website and check that out. That's all I had, Councillor Jelly.
Okay, Councillor Watkins, you had another question?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered it in Kathy's question, but my question was really, what is Fish and Wildlife's role in this? And is there anybody else at the province or some other government agency that I can call to do what you do? And it seemed like you were saying that Fish and Wildlife deals with larger animals and you're small to mid-size, so there's no one to deal with small to mid-sized animals?
There is not, no. So there's 8 licensed rehabilitation organizations in the province of Alberta. We're the largest and the most northerly, but absolutely not. They do not. So if you have an injured goose and you call Fish and Wildlife, they won't come and do anything. Their standard response, and of course a lot of us are accustomed to hearing, is let nature take its course, right, is what we often hear, which really doesn't help the community member who's concerned about that animal. Nor from a humane perspective from the animal. If that goose was out in the wild where it would get picked off by a predator and become part of the food chain, that's one thing. But when it's sitting in the city and it's suffering for 2 weeks because there's no predator to take care of it, there's just no service out there to come and rescue the animal. So that's where we step in and provide compassionate care and rehabilitation.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting. That's what my wife says all the time when I'm injured. Let nature take its course.
Right.
Madam Chair, I just in relation to your comment in relation to moving it, I I'm not sure. I'm not going to, it just because of where the funding is going from and where I'm hearing some of the conversation going, I'm not sure whether or not we can capture it in the EAC update.
Sorry, this is not the EAC update. This is the Wild North update that's next on our agenda.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, the one that Christian's going to speak directly to, isn't it also in relation? It's not just specifically tied to Wild North, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So our next item on the agenda is the Wild North funding request. So Blair, you're welcome to stick around for that if you'd like. That's right up. But if you have to go, we completely understand. So I'm seeing Kate pop on, so we can pass this over to Kate and Christian for 6.1, the Wild North funding request.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And then go from there. So thank you, Blair. And again, up to you whether you stick around or not.
Sorry, is his name Blair or Dale?
Dale.
Hey,
I'm
Dale.
sorry, Dale.
Yeah, that's okay. Not a problem.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Ray. It's time for another coffee. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, everybody, for your year. I sure appreciate it. Have an awesome day.
Thank you. All right. Kate, did you want to open this one up, or can we go straight to Christian?
We can probably go straight to Christian. He's got a fabulous presentation.
Great. Let's.
Lolly, if I could interrupt, it's Cheryl. We need to do the adoption of the minutes prior to this item.
Oh, thank you. Did anyone have any concerns with the minutes? No. Okay, I'm going to adopt those as presented. And thank you for keeping me in line, Cheryl. And then we'll go to Christian.
Hi, good morning. So I don't actually have a formal presentation for this item covering Wild North and the funding request. There's two items I wanted to highlight from the agenda report. And of course, you received the administrative backgrounder that's been recirculated from last year. So the reason that administration is coming forward with this request is we're caught at a bit of an interesting period in that typically Wild North would have been able to apply for the environmental initiative grant in 2020 for the 2021 season. That money was not provided as a result of some COVID related impacts. So Wild North was not able to apply for our environmental initiative grant for this year. And we also have a direction from council received last year about doing a grant review process, and that's likely to come to council in Q1 or Q2, depending on administration. So we're at the point where Wild North produces a service for the city. We recognize they do a lot of niche work that isn't captured through provincial agencies or municipal agencies, and we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to provide a committee with a recommendation that would cover a portion of the expenses of Wild North for the 2021 year. In addition, we have one other item I wanted to highlight from our agenda report, that this committee did receive advice from our Environmental Advisory Committee last year to produce ongoing sustainable operating funding for Wild North in recognition of the service they do provide. Because that was sort of captured within the grant policy review, we again are sort of caught in that period where Wild North doesn't have funding for 21 until we have the review process complete. So it's administration's recommendation that we bring forward a funding request to council for $5,000 for 2021 for Wild North's operations. So that's all I had to highlight from the agenda report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So we'll start with Councillor Mackay and then to Mayor Heron.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just follow up. And I think probably, Mayor, I might have captured some of your question in my question that I was going to ask administration earlier, and maybe some of the tenor of what was going on in the other questions. I mean, certainly we heard the work that Wild North does, and it's quite a bit more than actually I thought that they had. So that was a learning experience. But what I'm wondering, are the opportunities that presented by Wild North around maybe taking on, I mean, we all remember the challenge we had with the den under a residence back deck and some of the challenges. Now, I'm not saying that that would be fault of Wild North, but are we being informed by them? Would we have reached out to them as well? I know we reached out to a lot of subject matter experts. But I mean, if we would engage services with Wild North, would they become more of a, in that situation, would they become more of a second responder, or would they just provide information, and we'd still be on our own to deal with the problem of a coyote or coyote, whatever language you want to use.
Sure, Councillor Mackay. So, having conversations with Dale, and we worked with them for a couple of years, some of the value add propositions that Wild North has proposed to St. Albert administration is that they would help train in these instances, and they'd work with our municipal enforcement officers, and they'd help either, as Dale sort of spoke to, they would either provide upfront training or they'd provide supervision. So coyotes are a little bit of an interesting example because they fall under a few different categories. And if they are aggressive, we can contact Alberta Fish and Wildlife. As of right now, typically our municipal enforcement officers, if it's just a nuisance coyote, they'll come on site and they'll chase it away, or they'll try to remove it from the area if the best they can. But certainly we do recognize that Wild North provides a considerable service that we don't currently have the expertise internally as administration, and they do. And to be fair, Dale spoke about the City of Edmonton transferring 311 calls directly to Wild North, and both Public Works and municipal enforcement, if there is a rescue and rehabilitation, will actually provide residents with contact for Wild North. So we're doing something very similar already in the fact that we are sending a lot of our calls in that do come into St. Albert to Wild North, as well as our website does actually deliberately mention Wild North and the services they provide. So we are already sort of rerouting work away to Wild North.
And if I can just supplement one thing on that, Councillor Mackay, is last year we had an influx of baby geese in our storm system, and we did have to engage with Wild North. It was their busy season, and they provided some guidance, and we had utility staff go down into the confined space to save them in a sort of prescriptive manner. But we did talk about that last spring in getting some additional training to streamline those processes, because we engaged with the province and with Wild North to make sure we were crossing our T's and dotting our I's on that.
So just so that I'm clear, their role would be more in a consultant role. They don't actually dispatch anybody from there, any technician or any wildlife officer out. We're still responsible for taking their advice, and then, as you said, prescriptive. We would then be responsible for the rescue, or in the case like Councillor Jolie's mentioned, packing up the owl and taking it to them, or do they actually come out, respond, and provide a service like that, or are they just more consultative?
Wild North does actually dispatch. So in an instance where you'd said something like a potentially up to a coyote, but certainly on other like waterfowl and stuff, you likely would see someone like Dale or a volunteer with Wild North that's had training. So we're not sort of handing it off to our municipal enforcement and public works staff to do this work. Wild North is going to continue to provide the services they already do, even with additional training to our staff. I think more than anything, it's more about that distinguishing between services that are readily provided by Wild North and others that are expected to be provided by the province or by the municipal staff.
And the last question, Madam Chair, and I apologize for taking the floor for so long, but it's in relation to the proposed recommended motion that identifies the $5,000 due to the dynamics that you mentioned, Christian and Kate, in relation to kind of where we're caught between trying to find a funding source. Right now, you're suggesting or recommending that it comes out of the council contingency. That's $15,000 right now. I'm not sure whether, I mean, if that's, I think Diane's on the call. Is that still what it is, approximately 15,000? So sorry, I just see your name. I don't know whether or not she's there.
I assume Diane will jump on right away. But there we are.
Sorry, my microphone and speakers are not working. Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
You can hear me? Okay. Okay, sorry. So I totally missed the question.
I apologize. Yeah, you were, it came out of left field. I was just saying the recommended motion put forward by administration for Wild North funding would be to take the $5,000 that used to come out of the EIC and put it, take it out of council contingency. And I'm just, there's a reference in the backgrounder of $15,000, and I want to confirm that amount. And if there was a desire to actually go higher, we shouldn't go from there, but we would have to find another funding source. So I'm just wanting to make sure that it's at 15,000.
Yeah, so as part of the annual operating budget, council has a contingency of $15,000 that can be used each year. It hasn't been used a lot in the last couple of years, which is why we kind of recommended it, kind of because of the value. But certainly we have the full 15,000 available. Nothing has been committed against those funds for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Mackay, I guess to add to your question about whether they physically send someone out, I know they physically sent someone out for that heron because those are kind of bitey and scratchy, horrible birds. Whereas in my case, the owls are actually really easy to handle, which I was surprised at. But
Yeah, we have to clarify it wasn't the mayor though, right?
it wasn't. So I've got Mayor Heron with questions, and then Councillor Hanson and Councillor Hughes.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mackay. I was about to jump on and say, be careful how you talk about my cousins. Bitey and scratchy. I had a question about money. So Diane, options are council contingency as one, stabilization reserve would be another. Could we just add it to the 2021 operating budget? Maybe through through the environment department or enforcement, is that an option?
Well, to be able to add it to the 21 budget at this point, we could do it through the May budget adjustment.
Right. Yeah.
But then that would be increasing the overall budget for the city for the year.
Yeah. But these are options. That's all I'm kind of.
Yeah, they are options.
All right. Because to me, it doesn't really make sense to come from council contingency. It's not really a council project. So let's talk as we go through this and maybe figure out a different funding source. My other question was, so Kristen, you're recommending a one-time 5,000. Is that because you are hoping that once the new grant program comes out, Wild North could be funded through a new grant program? Oh, is that Carrie? I see your hand up. And you're muted.
So our existing policies through council is that technically we can't give funding to organizations that reside outside of the city of St. Albert. And so this one's kind of always fallen outside of that. And they have in the past. So what we're doing with the grant review is to relook at those relationships of how much service that they do provide in the city of St. Albert and things like that. So that's going to be part of that review for council to be looking at this spring.
Okay, so Carrie, are you seeing that process though involving an annual application?
Well, that's the question. Like, for something like this, it could be an ongoing, and that maybe for some of the organizations that we work with on a regular basis, it could be an ongoing funding or it could be an application. But that's going to be part of those discussions when we bring back the grant review. And so there's going to be a series of questions that are going to come to council. They'll be able to provide feedback. We'll also be having the discussion at the February strategic plan. So we'll be able to get some additional direction from council as we build the new grant program to move it forward.
Okay. All right. I won't jump into multi-year funding for Wild North today then, because I was thinking it probably should be multi-year, but in exchange for maybe an increase of the services they provided. Are you at all worried about the liability that Dale talked about? If our fire department is taking little ducklings out of a storm, like we're not worried about that?
Well, I think you did raise a really good point from that. And Christian, you can jump in here as well. And I know Kate had mentioned that our utility team had reached out to Wild North to be able to get some direction on how to do it properly. And so probably our fire department should probably have that same level of consultation with Wild North to be able to learn to do that. Then we'd be able to do it underneath their banner opposed to ours.
And Barrett and I are quite engaged on pulling ducklings out of storm sewers. So him and I have a very active communication back and forth come spring. So yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always quite public when they do. It's always I got to say this entire agenda item has been one of the best feel-good little agenda items we've had in a long time. It's been kind of fun, especially the beaver and the heron. Committee, I'm curious, maybe as questions come, about your thoughts if 5,000 is sufficient, or if we want to look at 7, 8, 10 one time out of I'm thinking stabilization reserve. And so I wouldn't mind hearing your thoughts as questions come, because I can make a motion to do 10 out of stabilization reserve. Just as a heads up, Chair Jolly.
I'll comment after. We've got Councillor Hanson and Councillor Hughes with questions. Maybe you guys can comment on that.
Thanks very much. The question for Christian, I think. So what does Ducks Unlimited do? Are they more of an education organization, or are they in the habit of saving fowl?
Yeah, they Councillor Hanson, yeah, Ducks Unlimited really does focus on habitat for ducks and waterfowl. They focus on education. We actually work and we provide annual funding to Ducks Unlimited. Or sorry, that's through Trout Unlimited. But we do work with these organizations to provide information and communications, and they work with our schools. They work with youth groups. They work with volunteer organizations, and they really do a lot of education based on environmental impact of actions and how it can affect wildlife and habitat.
So no, not really a duplication of services in this case.
Yeah, that's correct. It's totally different scopes of work.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Thank you. So 2 questions. So I'm assuming that the policy that comes about, it's going to be looking at more than just this one organization. It's going to be looking at potential for other organizations that are also serving St. Albert that aren't receiving funding. Because I'm thinking, for example, STARS. Like they do rescues every single year. And right now we're not contributing anything towards their services either. So is it looking at a broader picture, or is it just specific to this one item?
Well, that's going to be part of those discussions that we will be having with council in terms of how they want to take that. And so it could be that broader discussion, or it could be just targeted. So those are some of that direction we'll have to get back from our elected to be able to then form the policy moving forward.
Okay. The other question I had was procedural. So when I look at the agenda report, I don't see an extension in any of the backgrounder on, because right now the motion is to have it come for Q1 of 2021. And when I look at the backgrounder, it's saying that we're expecting it in Q2 or Q3. So should there be an additional motion today to give an extension on the due date?
This is for the grant review.
Yes, so because
Yeah.
the motion just has like to have it come back for Q1 of 2021.
Yeah,
Now you're saying
I would say, okay, I would be looking at Q2 because with council's strategic plan being at the end of February, and then we have to form the policy after that will take us into March or April. So I'd say Q2 to be safe.
So I'm just suggesting to the chair and to admin that we may actually want to add an extension onto this motion just so we don't have to do extra work next time, to say that we're going to give them extra time to accomplish this so that they're not in default of the motion.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I don't know if anyone wants to comment on Mayor Herron's suggestion for an increased amount stabilization reserve. I saw Councillor Watkins had a thumbs up. I'm seeing nods everywhere. Councillor Mackay, maybe not. Do you want to comment?
I support it. I was just going to say we should have those. I mean, obviously she's going to make the recommended motion if there's going to be debate or whatever. But I mean, if you want to speed up the process, yeah, I support more money.
Mayor Herron, do you want to propose something? I saw you seem to volunteer for that.
Yeah, I'll kind of modify the recommended motion so that the Community Living Standing Committee recommend to Council that Wild North receive a one-time grant of $10,000 to cover St. Albert-based wildlife rescue and rehabilitation operations in 2021 to be funded from the stabilization reserve.
Okay, so before I accept that, any questions? Or Councillor Hughes, did you want to see if Mayor Herron would take a friendly just to add that recommendation to extend the deadline?
Yes, I'm just wondering, Mayor Herron,
Yep.
just so and just, I mean, it could be a separate motion, but under the same, 2 motions in one, so to speak, and just give a deadline to the end of Q2.
Yeah, that works for you, Christian? Okay.
Renee, do you have something for us for that? Just to put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, I can put something something in the chat here if you just give me a second.
Sure. We can do that separately too. We can just go ahead with the first one, Mayor Herron. So I'll accept that. And any comments?
I mean, I think Wild North is a organization that many people in St. Albert are very much unaware of, unless maybe you actually needed their services and were referred to them by our staff. But at the same time, it seems to be a service that is provided in the Northern Alberta area that kind of falls between some cracks, especially when it comes to funding. And if they are willing to establish a relationship with the city of St. Albert with training and allowing us to work under their permit, I think $10,000 is a very good deal for the city to get that kind of extended service. I think we all know that St. Albert residents are very much daily interacting with these small wild animals. There was a coyote on my driveway yesterday, just standing there. I mean, they're not threatening, but we do coexist. And as Councillor Watkins already got some great advice from Wild North today about the synthetic urine. So I know St. Albert residents do care about these small animals and want to see them healthy and rehabilitated if necessary. So I think it would be very much accepted by our residents as well.
All right. Anyone else want to comment on debate? Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
So I'm going to support this. It's not a difficult decision to do this in my mind. It's proportionate to what Edmonton is doing. And especially if we are using more services similar to training going forward, then it actually decreases the workload for within the city staff so that it actually can do other things. And so relatively speaking, $10,000 will actually be a cost savings, especially if we have additional training and additional collaboration with this organization. So sometimes you have to spend a bit to actually save more in the end. And I think that's one of these things is about an investment with an actual ROI on top of the value of the animals, which really, to me, the value of the animals is significant. But regardless, if we can actually use our own services and our resources wiser, then this is going to be a better return for us. So I'm comfortable with that. And recognizing that, as you said, Mayor Heron, Edmonton's doing 120,000, and proportionately speaking, if we're about 10%, then it would actually be closer to 12. So 10 is still even under that. So I'm comfortable with that.
Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, I won't reiterate points already made, but I do support the extra funding. I could sense that in reading it, but I mean, certainly I had a number of questions, but Wild North were able to answer that. And actually, you know, for a $600,000 total budget and the work that they do in our community, particularly when you look at the volume this year, up over last year and potentially up again next year, the fact that we're contributing 4% of their budget right now, you know, that $10,000 isn't a big cost, particularly as Councillor Hughes says, there's maybe perhaps savings in efficiencies or productivity or even just knowledge transfer. I think that's a good use of funds. One thing I would maybe perhaps encourage Mayor Heron to do is advocate on behalf of the region, and particularly, I don't know in what role that would take, probably informally at this time, but certainly it sounded like from the presentation that Wild North being the only agency that looks after this type of need for all of Northern Alberta, I think that even if we can advocate and raise their profile a little bit, I think that goes a long way as well. Like I said, I looked on their website yesterday. They do have a lot of corporate sponsors and they do have a lot of individual funders. And but obviously, I think that's maybe possibly another role we can move forward as we try to raise their profile in our region. Anyways, that's my comment.
Mayor Heron, I suspect that the AC would be supportive of this motion. That's my best guess based at sitting at the table with them last year. So that's all I have. I'm supportive as well. Do you have anything to close?
No, Councillor Hanson, it might be something you want to get in as a guest speaker for the AUMA Environment Sustainability Committee as well. Just awareness is always good. That's all I got.
All right, I'll call for the vote. Hands is fine for just the four of us. Okay, that's unanimous. Councillor Hughes, Mr. LaFleur's tossed in that proposed motion in the chat. Do you want to move that?
I thought it was all wrapped up in one, but if Councillor Hughes
Yeah.
wants to move it, that's fine, just for clarity.
I don't mind if Mayor Herron does it just to keep it clean, because I also have the phone decided to ring at the same time happening. So
Mayor Herron, do you want to take a look at that motion, see if that works for you?
Yeah, so that the deadline for administration to bring forward to committee a recommendation for a more comprehensive policy to specify circumstances in which funding may be provided to organizations that work in St. Albert but are not based in St. Albert is extended to June 30th, 2021. Thank you for the wording on that, everyone.
Okay, and the beginning of that would be just that the CLSC recommends to council that?
Yes, sorry, you're right, process-wise.
All right, unless you have anything to say, Mayor Herron, I'll just call for the vote. Okay, let's call for the vote. That's unanimous. Great, that was quick. Thank you very much for Christian for that presentation and the help with that one. And because it's the Environment Party today, next thing on our agenda is the Environmental Advisory Committee 2020 report and 2021 priorities. So Christian's got a presentation for us. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. You're able to see my screen. So I'll preface this by saying that council and committee would typically see the chair of our Environmental Advisory Committee provide this update for the year, the annual review report, as well as like future coming year priorities. We unfortunately we lost our EAC chair Tara Fulton. Her term had expired, so we're caught between not having an election for our Environmental Advisory Committee for chair. So I'll provide presentation today, and then typically in the future you will see the chair continuing to give these annual updates and our priorities. So I'll start a little bit with what the EAC's role is. So we have a pretty well-defined functions that they perform for the city. So the first one is they provide advice to council, and you'll see this written advice attached to agenda reports, or they'll be presented directly to council. And they're listed as priorities for the Environmental Advisory Committee, and they typically align with our environmental master plan. The second function of the EAC is to provide input directly to administration. So that's when administration will come directly to committee to seek informal comments about environmental projects or even other larger city projects and issues identified by administration. The third role really is just to receive updates from administration. We'll bring in presentations from subject matter experts. This information is really used to help inform EAC, and then later we'll be called upon to provide that advice on these topics to administration or council directly. So sometimes we'll bring in presentations like the Sturgeon River Watershed group. They'll give an update on some future work or recently completed work, and then later EAC will draw upon those presentations to provide advice. So for the 2020 EAC priorities that were approved, there was 4 of them. One was the recommendation of the Environmental Initiatives Grant Program and Community Recognition Programs. The second was to provide advice on the Environmental Master Plan update. The third was to provide advice on single-use item reduction strategy. And then finally provide advice to administration and council on the Parks Bylaw review and Fire Bylaw review, as well as the proposed property assessed clean energy, also known as the Clean Energy Improvement Program development. COVID really threw a wrench in the works a little bit for this year. So in addition to having to cancel several EAC meetings, a number of items that were brought forward from administration had been canceled as a result of COVID-19. So the Environmental Initiatives Grant Program for 2020 was canceled. So EAC didn't have to provide review and recommendations. We did able to provide advice and input on the Community Recognition Program. The Environmental Master Plan was postponed as well due to COVID-19. Single-use item reduction strategy, again, canceled. But we did actually have an opportunity to provide review of the Parks Bylaw and the Fire Bylaw. And just most recently in November, they did receive a presentation from Municipal Climate Change Action Center on the Clean Energy Improvement Program. Some of the other input that was provided by EAC, they did have a review of our annual report on the environment. It's now called the Environmental Report Card. It was released quite a bit later than normal, so you likely saw the 2019 report come out just recently in December. Typically, it's released in April of each year, and again, it's mostly delayed due to the response to COVID-19. And the Environmental Initiative Grant extension requests. So this is the items that were awarded in 2019. We had a number of requests, 5 in total, that came forward from our community groups and said, hey, we've had to ask for an extension just because we weren't able to produce and complete our projects in 2020. And then EAC votes on this and they provide an extension to those funds into the project. A couple of the updates I was received, the Sturgeon River Watershed Management Plan, which was presented by Leah Kongsrud, who's our Executive Director of the Sturgeon River Watershed Group. She provided an update on the integrated watershed plan for the region. Air quality in the capital region, which is an interesting presentation from Alberta Capital Airshed. And it was provided just sort of showing the difference between COVID and normal relations when it comes to air quality. Our Municipal Energy Specialist program was detailed and provided an update to our Environmental Advisory Committee based on the work they've completed. We got an update on our environmental management system, as well as waste management update and the impacts of COVID-19. The 2021 priorities, which were voted on and approved by EAC, are as follows, and kind of a continuation of 2020. Recommend that 2021 Environmental Initiative Grant Program and Community Recognition Program, so this is done annually. Provide advice on the Environmental Master Plan update, which is now going to be called the Green Environment Strategy for 2021. Continued work on the Parks Bylaw review, as well as providing additional advice on Property Assessed Clean Energy and Clean Energy Improvement Program. And finally, we have a 3-year strategic update to the EAC work plan, which is done preemptively in 2021 to impact the 2022 to 2025 years. Final slide is EAC wanted to acknowledge the continued support and leadership of St. Albert Council for establishing the EAC to provide advice to Council on environmental matters. The EAC supports innovative programs and encourages residents' participation in environmental responsibility as an extension in the Environmental Master Plan. Administration would like to thank the 2020 Environmental Advisory Committee members, Anshuman Kar, who is our Vice Chair, Tara Fulton, who was our Chair, Alison Lefebvre, Adrian McGargle, Brad Piari, Sherman Hanowski, and Stephen Lord. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? I'm seeing no's all around. Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Thanks, Christian. Just around COVID, and I was looking at the water consumption. Did we notice a difference in 2020 with water consumption, with everybody being home and not, well, a lot of people working from home? And how do we start to approach that if, if we're working differently?
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. I'll probably refer to Kate when it comes to the actual consumption numbers if they've had them calculated for 2020 yet. We do have our water conservation bylaw that we'll have to continue to promote, promoting water consumption and water conservation. Kate perhaps could maybe talk about some of the consumption numbers we've seen.
We actually didn't see a huge increase in consumption based on COVID, people working from home. Where we actually saw a major change in like the way we do our business is waste management. So our 3-bin system, that was a very different sort of framework to manage because people were accumulating substantially more waste because of working from home. But water was much more consistent than I thought it would be.
Great, thank you for that. That's all I have.
Just so you know, Councillor Hanson and Kate and Christian, because I sit on the Wastewater Commission, the plant saw increased flows this year, though quite substantially increased flows.
That's interesting. Okay, any other questions for Christian or Kate? Go ahead, Councillor McKay.
I'll just ask a question in relation, and it's probably related to finance again, and I apologize, but with the COVID response and the identification, when we took the $33,000 away from the grants, did we put that back in the budget for 2021 for EAC? I just want to confirm that.
Yes, all of those changes that were done in 2020 were just one time for 2020. So they would have gone back into the budget for 21.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we don't have anything else, we've got a couple of proposed motions coming out of that. Does anyone want to move those?
Yeah, I can do that.
Go ahead, Councilor McKay.
That the Community Living Standing Committee recommend to Council that the 2020 Annual Report to Council Environmental Advisory Committee, provided as an attachment to the January 18th, 2021 agenda report entitled Environmental Advisory Committee 2020 Report and 2021 Priorities, be received as information. Do you want me to read the second one?
Yeah.
The Environmental Advisory Committee's proposed 2021 priorities on page 9 of the 2020 Annual Report to Council, Environmental Advisory Committee, provided as an attachment to the January 18th, 2021 agenda report titled Environmental Advisory Committee 2020 Report and 2021 Priorities be approved. Don't say that with new teeth.
All right, so I'll accept that. Any comments?
No, thank you. I think it was, as been mentioned already, great presentation. And unfortunately, COVID has had a significant impact in relation to the work the Environmental Advisory Committee had identified in their priorities, and the fact that they were able to actually complete part of their priorities should be a testament to the great committee, the great members that we have on the committee, and the wonderful leadership that we provide with our council member.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands going up, so I'll call for the vote on that. All those in favor? That is unanimous. And Cheryl, unless I'm totally missing something, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for coming out this morning, and see you probably this afternoon. Bye. Meeting adjourned.